Welcome back. Paul Catalina, Payton Soicher of rankingsrightnow.com, and rapidly becoming one of our favorite segments of the week, because this is where, here's the thing. This is where, we're a rusticated, lowly, uneducated people. No. And then we get Payton here, who's a numbers guy, a mathematician, a stats nerd. And we get to raise the level of the discourse here over what was right before you came on. Shut up, Garrett. I'd rather talk to Payton. So literally moments before that happened. Payton, I see that you do have, I'm curious, you have a guest star in the shot today, your dog. I am a dog lover extraordinaire, and we don't have one right now. We lost ours last year.
I'm sorry to hear.
Yeah, we're still in the grieving phase. Although, like every other week, we have a Humane Society dog come in here, and every week I'm like, "Can I have this one?" And my wife's like, "I'm not ready yet." No.
I unfortunately know that pain. I get it.
Yeah. So who's
the
guest star?
This is Blizzard. She's an Old English sheepdog. She's 8. I just brought her in right before because she will claw at the door the entire time I'm talking. And then hopefully while I'm still going, she's probably going to get up and claw that she wants to get out and go do something else. So for right now, she's hanging out right there. So it's all good.
All right, Blizz, we're with you. Okay. Whatever you want, we're fine. We allow dogs. When we first started this show, we did it. It was in 2020. It was at the upstairs of my house. So my dog would quite often very much be a part of the show.
Oh, it's
because
great.
If the doorbell rang or like somebody was delivering something, or he would bark. Like our intern at the time would not always come right when the show started. It was depending on his work day. We had 2 or 3, but depending on, it was kind of flow throughout the week of who it was.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't always right before the show started. So if they came at 3:30, 30 minutes after the show started, he was barking and running downstairs, and then he'd come up,
more entertainment, way more fun.
Yeah. No, he was a part of it. He was a big part of the show. And I think he was mad that we weren't doing the show there once we moved to the studio. Well, what am I supposed to do with my day now? What? Yeah. We were doing the show. We had a podcast together, and then you took the podcast somewhere else and didn't bring me. This is unacceptable.
Dogs are the best. It's way more fun. Way more fun.
So, Payton, how was your week last week? There were a couple crazy things that happened. Namely BYU and Kansas State. That one threw a wrench into things, I'm sure.
While most of us were sleeping, nonetheless.
Yeah.
I mean, it's at least give us a little bit of a heads up if you're going to pull off something like that. So, you're watching it at the end, you're like, I think I can figure out where this thing's going to go. And then you look in the morning, you're like, oh my gosh, that really did happen last night. So, and it was fun to see a lot of college football personalities also have kind of the same reaction of man, I wish that would have happened a little bit earlier. And it was great for BYU and what seemed like a great night game and a really cool night game environment. But that was a crazy one. Really, from the algorithm perspective, there were 2 big challenging things that the algorithm did not pay attention to, which was Mizzou barely winning in overtime. The kicker decided to aim for Kansas City instead of Missouri, as most college kickers do. That caused a big ripple because if you look at a top 10 team barely beating an unranked team, they might drop 1 or 2 slots typically, especially at this point in the year. They took a heavy fall out of the top 10. I think a lot of people, and I think of a lot of the AP poll, is kind of sick and tired right now of this whole Ohio State playing a bunch of nothing, a bunch of the top teams really playing nobody for us to evaluate on. And that just happened to be the game where they were like, we're done with this. Goodbye. We'll give someone else a chance. They'll play for a more competitive spot. And along those lines, USC didn't really drop after their game at Michigan. And that one seemed validated, right? That's a tough road game. That's a tough environment. Michigan just ran it all over them. And a very Big Ten introduction to USC for sure. So when they didn't drop, that was also very historic, if you want to think of it that way. Those 2 events where someone loses and doesn't really drop that far, and someone wins and drops a lot, both things the algorithm doesn't really pay attention to. They're outliers. They're things that aren't, if the algorithm took them more seriously, it would be a lot less efficient in a lot other areas. So they kind of ignore that type of noise, if you want to call it that. So we've readjusted, we've made all the corrections that are needed. But those were, if you took away, if the algorithm were to correctly place those two teams, it would have looked a lot better overall.
Yeah. Okay. We'll start with the big boy this week, Georgia and Alabama. The projections right now, you have Georgia winning and then flip-flopping with Texas and going to number 1, and Alabama taking a 4-spot tumble to number 8. What happens if Alabama wins? Do they go to number 1? Do they jump those 3 spots, or do they just kind of push everybody up one or switch, and then cause maybe a little switch?
It's a really great question. So, by the way, I'm welcome to share my screen again. I have all the numbers.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Garrett's ready.
Great. Let's have some fun again. So here we are. In your scenario, you talk about this rankings right now prediction, right? Mm-hmm. So on our website, www.rankingsrightnow.com, as you can see, Georgia and Texas are flipping. Why is that? Because, as you said, Georgia is like a 1 or 2 point favorite against Alabama. They're building this up to be the game of the year, which it's hard not to say why it wouldn't be. I think Georgia and Texas play in a couple more weeks. So if Georgia can win this game, that Georgia-Texas game, it might blow the roof off of even this one. But as of right now, Alabama is projected to lose 24-26. And we have this flip-flop. Now, why that's interesting, if you look at ESPN's FPI index, and let's go ahead and jump on over to Alabama. ESPN has an FPI index where they give probabilities of who's likely to win. They're giving Alabama the edge in this game. So when we ran 10,000 simulations of week 6 using our algorithm, 77% of the time, Alabama is the number 1 seed. There's a better chance of Alabama being the number 1 seed, but according to Vegas, not everyone, most people are leaning on the dogs. So this is a really interesting landscape. But to your point, if we look at this scenario right here, yes, it looks like based off the winner of this game, Alabama's going to move to number 1 or Georgia's going to move to number 1. Only in some obscure scenarios did we see, if we look at Texas. Texas has a 15% chance of holding on to that number 1 seed, or number 1 ranking, I should say, and 84% chance of falling to that 2 slot. But that's the big thing that caught my eye as well is, hey, Vegas is saying that Georgia's winning this game. ESPN is saying Alabama's going to win this game. It's going to be really close, but overall, it seems as if the majority is saying Alabama or Georgia will be the number 1 seed in this scenario. And if we, you mentioned Alabama dropping down to that 8 seed. If we go ahead and look at Georgia, I keep saying seed, I want to say ranking. Georgia, it's 9 or 10. So, and the reason for that being is they shouldn't lose to the 4 ranked team. They're the 2. Mm-hmm. So that's why Alabama doesn't have nearly as harsh of a punishment as Georgia might have in this scenario.
All right, now, one of the other projected things you have this week is you've got some teams that are falling out of the rankings and rather precipitously should they lose and it follow. Louisville against Notre Dame, Illinois against Penn State, Oklahoma State against Kansas State. Oklahoma, they play Auburn. So if they lost that game, they should absolutely drop. And then BYU, who plays here tomorrow at Baylor, and you have them dropping 19 spots. Those are all kind of different opponents. Like the first 3 are all playing really good teams. The last 2 are not right now as far as the records and the schedule goes. Why such a huge drop for Louisville should they lose to Notre Dame?
It's very interesting because I actually had a discussion with someone who is very close with Louisville, and they had the same reaction. How do we drop so far if we lose to Notre Dame? Like that's a competitive matchup right there. And that's because as of right now, you have Louisville that would be losing to Notre Dame that has a bad loss on the year. So that separation right there, and based off how the AP poll tends to rank these teams at this point in the year, that's the drop that's expected. If you look at his history, that's a traditional drop. A lot of, as you mentioned, a lot of those other teams, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, BYU, that are a little bit closer to that 25 range, and they're flirting with just being in, versus someone like Louisville or Notre Dame. If you do the same thing with Notre Dame, by the way, if we go ahead and look at Notre Dame's simulation, Notre Dame is in the same exact predicament. If you look at the potential ranks, if they lose, there's less than a 1% chance, according to our simulation, that they retain that AP top 25. And that one sounds a little bit more reasonable. If you say, hey, does a 2-loss Notre Dame team belong in the top 25, where you have Army and Navy that are both 4-0, or Navy projected to win? Should they be in versus a 2-loss Notre Dame team? That's a tough argument to make. So if you look at it that way, right, where 15 and 16 are almost right next to each other in terms of their ranking status, right? If you have Notre Dame out at 16, it kind of makes sense to also have Louisville out at 15. So that's kind of the theory behind that. Everyone else is kind of too close to that 25 range, that with that loss, that kind of puts them out and brings somebody new in.
Yeah, Illinois and Penn State's a very interesting game to me. What would it mean if Illinois rolls into Happy Valley and upsets the Nittany Lions?
So right now, if we have, based off of our 10,000 simulation runs, if Illinois can beat Penn State, which you see right there, ESPN's giving them a 13.75% chance to win this game. Not likely. So if they can overcome those odds, every single simulation that we run has them at least in the top 13. A top 10 finish is looking at 42%. So you're getting close to a 50-50 shot that they become a legitimate contender for a top 10 spot, and definitely a legitimate contender for those top 12 spots overall for the college football playoff. This would really put them on the map. They had that great game against Nebraska, and that kind of upped that hype a little bit. It kind of took the gas out of Nebraska. Penn State, on the other hand, can really take advantage of this win. Penn State kind of needs a little bit of a resume booster right now. Because Illinois won that game in Nebraska, this puts Penn State in a perfect spot to take advantage of a ranked win right now. So I don't believe, if we look at Penn State's simulation analysis, Penn State doesn't have a lot of room to move up, just because Georgia and Alabama, you have two Titans that are going to clash, and one of them might knock the other one further down. But other than that, there's not that much room for them to move up. All of those other teams either aren't playing anyone this week. I don't believe Tennessee has a game this week, or they're just projected to be a heavy favorite. So there's not going to be a lot of room to move up. So, but they can definitely take advantage of becoming an 8 or 7 seed. That's not unlikely. So they really need to take advantage of this scenario.
For Oklahoma State, what are the kind of, like, Oklahoma State and Kansas is a really interesting game because they both need this really bad. Like they really do. After Kansas State got stroked, Oklahoma State just didn't look like themselves at all. Utah really took it to them. You have them dropping 14 spots if the result holds. What would happen should they wake up out of their doldrums, find Ollie Gordon again, and win this game?
Great. So let's go ahead and actually play with a what if simulation on this, because that's a perfect scenario. So, and if anyone has any other what if simulations, kind of like we did last week, I thought that was fun. Let's go ahead and play with that again. So right now, if we have in week 5, we go to Oklahoma State and Kansas State. Let's just flip the score, 32-26, right? They go on a nice road win. I don't think the points are going to be that much different. We go ahead and run the simulation. In this scenario, you now have Oklahoma State jumping up to 18. Once again, not a lot of room to move up. It's really, really stiff. Penn State, Utah, Missouri, Michigan, USC, I don't see any of them really going anywhere. That's why Notre Dame isn't projected to jump up that much if they win. That's why Louisville is not projected to jump up that much. It's really stiff up top right now. So Oklahoma State can move up a couple slots with a win, and that sends Kansas State out of the top 25. Same thing. You have that will do a 2-loss Kansas State team or a 2-loss Oklahoma State team. You both kind of had your chances. It's not there anymore. It's time to move on to somebody else.
Yeah. All right. Bracket Cat wants to know what happens if K-State won 48-0.
48-0. See, these are the type of scores that I want to hear, right? Give me the impossible. That's what this is supposed to handle. Perfect. Yeah. So we reset all the scores. We go down and we find that game again. Kansas State 48-0. Was that right?
Mm-hmm.
48-0.
Which happened a couple years ago.
It's always my favorite when people say, give me 100-0, because that's what people really want to see, the extremes. Okay, 48-0. They move up a couple more slots. See, now they're up to the 7 slots to the 16 seed. That's a big blowout win. It's going to give you a little bit more love in the rankings. So do I think that's a hard 16? No. 15, 14, maybe. You're making a big statement against a ranked team. You're showing that you're over the BYU thing. Maybe the BYU is, hey, that's on the road. I think someone called BYU a vampire team. Any night game, they just typically win. And in the day, they just are flat, right? Maybe you just say, hey, that was just last week. That's not indicative of what we actually are as a team. Here we are. We're making a real statement. We are a real contender. Put us back in that 15, 16 slot.
Hey, Payton, what happens if South Alabama upsets LSU?
See, this is what I'm talking about, guys. That's what I want. All right. So here we go. Now we got South Alabama. Who are they playing again?
LSU, right there. Yeah.
Give me a crazy score.
Let's say South Alabama 35, LSU 23.
I mean, you could have said any score.
I know.
This would have been a crazy one. So here we go. All right, here we go. We're going to run our simulations. And it's fast, people, right? Just as a reminder, this is what we have. South Alabama 35, LSU 23. We have LSU dropping. I don't even know where they are.
They should be out.
Yes. I mean, I can't find them. Typically, I have.
Oh, there they are, 32. Here, they're at number 32.
32. Okay, perfect. Thank you for pointing that out to me. All right, so they're out. They'd definitely be out. Once again, 2-loss team right there. And just for fun, if you're curious on where South Alabama would land in this scenario, we're only showing the top 25 teams. So let's go ahead and we change this to all teams right here. And then I usually just cheat and do a control find South. There's South Carolina, South Florida. South Alabama would jump up to the 108th ranked team. So they're way down there. So that's a 14-point boost, but still nowhere close to the top 25. But that would definitely ruin LSU's season. By the way, speaking of LSU kind of madness, if you remember a few weeks ago, LSU won in South Carolina on a very controversial ending. Yep. The refs really took that one away. So one of the cool things about the what if simulation is you can go back in time and see where the future would have led you. So for example, if we go back and let's go ahead and change this back to the top 25 teams. If we go back to week 3 of that game and we say, hey, what if South Carolina's pick 6 actually stood and they finished that game with 7 more points, which would make it a 40-36 score. If we run these simulations, if we go to week 4, so that happened in week 3, we can go ahead and look at week 4. Week 4 has South Carolina up to 19 and LSU down to 31. But we keep that momentum in the what if analysis. So if we go to week 5, South Carolina was still in there. They're still at 19. LSU is not in the top 25. We then go to week 6, which would be this week. Now you have South Carolina moving up to 17 and LSU finally breaking back into the top 25 with their projected win this week. So South Carolina got like barely any votes in the AP top 25 in this most recent poll. If they win that game at LSU, our algorithm predicts they're a top 17 team. That changes the entire landscape of this season. South Carolina's crawling to get back into this. They're begging to get back into this on what very easily could have been a game winner that they had against LSU on that big upset. And LSU is not nearly in the position that they are right now, right? If we go back to this is having them just now ranked at 22 and getting some love back. Right now, they're projected to be at 16. And And they're losing a couple spots because they're not playing anyone important. And we think that there's a couple more teams that are going to slide ahead of them because they're proving a little bit more. So that's a gigantic change in these rankings. So one of the great things about our rankings right now, what if simulation, is it gives you the ability to change something in the past and see how it would have played out moving forward.
All right, we have two more from the chat.
Yes.
That we'd like to run through. I have one that's probably more of a, because you would have to do it about like 5 or 6 teams that would have this possibility right now. So I'll send it to you after,
Okay.
so we can have it for next week.
Love it.
But Iowa State, if Houston beats Iowa State, what happens?
Okay. Let's find Houston and Iowa State right here. So let's take a couple points away. We'll give 23 on the road, and let's do a nice, a good win, 40-23 Houston. We go ahead and run the what if simulation. So here we go. It doesn't look like Houston cracks the top 25,
no.
but Iowa State is for sure dropping out of the top 25 with that loss.
Yeah, down to number 34. Yeah, okay,
yes.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, all right. And then the last one is Pitt is currently 4-0. What has to happen for them to get ranked?
That's a great question. So that's actually better suited for this. And we have this in our newsletter. I post everything. I'm going to integrate this into the website here soon. But if we look at Pitt right now, Pitt doesn't look like they play this week. So this is why this looks a little bit strange right here. But so they're top 34, it looks like. There's a chance of them being the 34th, 35th, and 36th team. They're getting a lot of love. Rutgers is another team, by the way, that a lot of people have not paid any attention to. They don't even play a ranked opponent until late October. I think it's USC. They could go 6-0, 7-0, 8-0 going into that game. They need to be have a little bit more attention paid to them. So as of right now, I'm not familiar with where Pitt's schedule is lined up for the next couple of weeks, but they're right on that borderline. So I think with a good solid win or two, they're definitely in that top 25 conversation.
Wow. I mean, look, this has been so much, so much. It's great. It's absolutely great. And you know, we've hit, I think we've kind of hit all the big boys for this week. And yeah, that Alabama Georgia thing, Peyton, I think it's gonna be fascinating to see how people react to it, depending on how the game goes. Like,
For sure.
I don't think it's gonna be a blow. Like, but there's a chance that one team just blows a tire, right? And then it gets really weird, you know, on how that could work out. And then Texas, should they go ahead and beat Mississippi State, which everybody thinks that they will, if they beat them, cover the spread. Well, I mean, covering the spread is going to be tough because it's like nearly 40 points.
Yeah.
But if they cover that spread, say they do exactly what Vegas thinks they'll do, cover that spread and beats Mississippi State by 40, as the number one team, they could still drop because number 2 and number 4 played each other, and one of those teams is going to jump up by benefit of having played a better team. And Texas has the win over Michigan, which is still ranked, but and they weren't tested in that game. So it's weird to see how people will balance out all that information.
There's two things to really keep in mind. One is these are people, right?
Yeah.
When you are a person, you tend to value information that you saw more recently more valuable than things you saw in the past. Oh, that wasn't really real, right? But if you would have asked somebody 2 weeks ago after that Michigan and Texas game, you'd be like, Michigan is nothing, right? Prior to them beating USC, you'd be like, it's over for them. It's done. We talked last week about their quarterback problems. Like, there's no way, right? They can't figure this out. People really value what they see right now. And I believe so many eyes are going to be on that Alabama-Georgia game that people aren't even going to care how much Texas wins by. It's just not on their mind. I don't have the data to prove this yet. I haven't dug deep enough into it yet. But I still think that's a reason why a lot of West Coast teams don't get the love that they really deserve, because no one was really watching it. It was too late at night. I missed the BYU upset. What happened? I'll watch the highlights on SportsCenter. Oh, interesting score. Yeah, they probably should be ranked. I really do believe it's just being a person. So you have to evaluate these things on a case-by-case scenario and really say, what were people feeling in that moment? And as you mentioned, if it is just an absolute brawl and it comes down to the last second, maybe they don't really, who knows? Maybe they say 1-2 Alabama and Georgia. That's it. We know what we saw. Those are clearly the two best teams in the country. Or maybe, like you say, someone just comes out flat and wasn't ready for the hype. And we have a new era without Nick Saban, right? Does that play into effect where if Alabama does not come out and say, that's not what we're used to seeing, that's not a top 5 team, they shouldn't even be in the conversation. It could be worse than 10. So you just have to feel of what are these people really evaluating and how are they evaluating it right now and not taking the full context in the picture.
Payton Soicher, rankingsrightnow.com. Go sign up for your account. You can,
free, everybody.
It's free, or you can pay. There's more like the more you pay, the more cool stuff you get to do. So
yeah, exactly.
And thanks to Blizzard for just being chill this whole time. Wanted to be a part of it. Like that's the best.
How can you say no?
Yeah, God love dogs. God, just absolutely do it. But Payton, we'll talk to you again next week, buddy.
Awesome. Thank you for your time, Paul.
Payton Soicher, rankingsrightnow.com. Go to that website.